How's it going, guys? Cameron here is Canadian Gamer, back at you with another retro video talking about my experiences growing up with the first-person shooter. I'm going to try to make this a short video, albeit there is lots to talk about, so we'll see how we do for time. So basically, growing up, obviously with video games in my childhood from the late 80s, working my way through the early to mid 90s, grew up with the Super NES and the NES, of course. And my family and we didn't have a computer until around 95, 96. I know when my family moved up to this area that we're in, going to school, I was playing hockey with another guy. His name was Kyle. And I remember when we talk about video games at school or in the classroom, again, we'd be talking about games on the Super NES. And we'd say, "Hey, Kyle, what are you playing?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I'm playing Full Throttle." And we're like, "What's Full Throttle?" And then he'd say, "Well, it's on my PC, my dad's PC." And his father was a chiropractor in the town I lived in, so I think they weren't doing too bad financially speaking. And later on, Kyle was talking to us about a game he was playing called Doom. Again, like in one ear and out the other, I'm just like, "What's Doom?" And then around 1996, again, my family purchased a Packard Bell computer, Pentium 75, and of course, me being the gamer in the household, my sister a little bit. The gears started turning in my head. Oh, I got a PC now, which my family has purchased because we want to get basic internet. Back then, the internet was like a new thing, and here I am trying to run games on the PC, pissing my family off because back then, and a lot of you guys that are my age, I'm 36, soon to be 37, you guys can probably relate to what I'm about to say. Back then, Windows 95 had just launched, and it was a weird time to be gaming on the PC because kind of moving away from diskettes to CD-ROM based media. And not only that, Windows 95 took what was called a program that we used to use called MS-DOS, which used to run externally from Windows 3.1. So you could log off of Windows 3.1, the older iteration of Windows, and you'd just be in a skeleton DOS mode where you'd run these games. Well, with Windows 95, MS-DOS ran within the Windows hub, which created a lot of conflicts when you tried to run a lot of these games, because a lot of these games, remember, you still had to go through DOS prompt to run. So anyways, long story short, around 95, 96, a lot of the dollar stores in and around my area would sell the 3.5-inch diskettes, and they were called shareware. And you'd go there, and for like a couple of bucks, you could purchase this disc, and it would give you like the first several levels of a game, as an example. And me, as a young kid, 12, 13, 14 years old, I was happy as pig and shit. So I'd buy these diskettes, and I'd bring them home. And you'd go on to MS-DOS, and you type in, like, let's say you wanted to play the Doom, the shareware of Doom. You type in DOS, you type in CD/Doom, and then you hit enter, and then bring you to the next line, and then you type in Doom, and then boom, it would boot the game. And then you'd run the game in DOS through Windows 95, but oftentimes the games would crash. They would boot you out of DOS and back into Windows. There was all kinds of compatibility issues, which we won't get into too far here, but maybe another video we can talk about that. So I started picking up a lot of these shareware games at the dollar store, and some of them that come to mind would be Quarter 7, Catacomb Abyss, Catacomb 3D, Blake Stone, Alien of Gold, of course, Wolfenstein 3D, and there was another game that I picked up called Rot, basically Rise of the Triad. And it was very much kind of like Wolfenstein, where you were hunting down, I think it was Nazis. And at the time, I used to play Rise of the Triad quite a bit. And later on in 96, again, I'm still in public school. I remember seeing this. We were in the library. It was during class. We took a trip to the library. That's what we would do in school. And the whole classroom was in the library. And we were on the computers. Again, a lot of us didn't have computers. These were things that the school could afford, but a lot of the families couldn't. And somebody, I don't know who it was, they somehow installed Duke Nukem 3D on the computer. And I had never seen or heard of this game before. I had played the original Duke Nukem side-scrolling games, but Duke 3D, I didn't even know about it. And I'm in the library, and we're seeing like some guy's playing it, and he's unlocking doors with key codes, and there's flashing strobe lights, and there's strippers, and this was like a big deal back then. There was never ever anything quite like this. This was your first legitimate, rated R video game that was the whole enchilada. It wasn't just gun violence. There was, like I said, strippers. There was lewd content, lewd voice acting. It was pretty crazy to see this. Now, this game came out around the same time as Super Mario 64. So it's kind of weird when you see those two games. I know they're not the same type of game, but you kind of see how technology was rapidly progressing because Mario 64 and 64 had already incorporated some graphical techniques to sort of get rid of and eliminate the pixelation. However, Duke Nukem 3D was using what's called the build engine, and a lot of the companies, I guess they acquired the rights from, or they were able to purchase, the rights to use the build engine from 3D Realms that developed Duke Nukem. So you'd see a lot of games that looked very similar to Duke Nukem. Around that time, you had Hexen, Heretic, or you might pronounce it Heretic, Redneck Rampage, Power Slave. Again, you had all kinds of games. Shadow Warrior. Blood was a big one as well, by GT Interactive. Blood was one that was really impressive to see. And like I said, we'd pick up these shareware discs, and soon thereafter, you could buy these shareware CDs, and you get like 30 games in one. How are we doing for time here? 7 minutes? Yeah, we'll keep going. So we get these shareware discs, and we'd play the shit out of those. We didn't care that it wasn't the full version of the game. So basically, getting closer to 97, 98, you could see the limitations of the PC that our household had. Again, Pentium 75. We started to see games like Quake come out, Half-Life in 1998. A lot of these games, unfortunately, they would not run on my computer. The biggest rage towards the late 90s was called the 3DFX card. When you bought PC Gamer, they would talk about these chips you could buy, Voodoo cards. There was a whole slew of 3DFX cards that sort of hit the market, and you basically needed one of these cards to accelerate the graphics on your computer. So that pretty much spelled the end to me PC gaming and the first-person shooters. I know some of the last ones I played on my PC was Unreal Tournament, and another one, it was either Star Wars Dark Forces or Jedi Knight. I can't remember. I remember me and a buddy that lived down the road, literally down the street, we'd have these sort of like I think it was like a LAN is what they would call it, where I dial his phone number on the modem, and it would literally, you'd hear the doot, 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 doot. It would dial his number, and then he would accept the incoming invite, and me and him would play. This was the first time I ever played an online game. We were playing Grand Theft Auto, the original Grand Theft Auto, and we were playing, like I said, Unreal Tournament and Star Wars. And the frame rate, I kid you guys not, was like this. And we didn't care. We were having a blast. It was so surreal to see me in my house. He's down the street, and we're playing each other on the computer. I'd never seen anything like it. And then, of course, the N64, towards the late 90s, starts getting games like Turok, the Dinosaur Hunter, and GoldenEye. GoldenEye was a big deal. I didn't have an N64, so I felt like, the odd man out. I'd go over to my buddy's house, and they'd have an N64 literally in their mudroom. N64 on the ground. All four of us are sitting on the ground with 4 controllers, playing 4-screen GoldenEye on a big CRT TV. We'd go over to my buddy's place after school, and we'd be playing that. And I was no good at it because everybody else had an N64, and here I am with the Sega Saturn. So kind of felt like the odd man out there. So yeah, years later, I get back into gaming a little over 10 years ago, and I picked up Rage because I saw it was, hotly anticipated, developed by id Software. I picked up Rage on the Xbox 360. I went to GameStop and purchased it brand new at EB Games, and I was really disappointed with Rage. Some people may disagree with that sentiment, but I feel like Rage, I don't know, they missed the mark on that. The new Rage looks pretty good. I haven't played it, but yeah, the original Rage I didn't really like that. And then I started collecting a lot for the original Xbox. Now this is where I want to talk about a little thing called motion sickness. I started playing Half-Life 2, and I started to notice I was getting motion sickness. I played Half-Life 2 for an hour, and then all of a sudden I felt like I had to throw up. So I put the game down, and then I tried playing Wolfenstein on the PlayStation 2. Same thing, severe motion sickness. And this went on for quite a bit, and then I got over it. So I don't know if it's just because I was away from the FPS environment for so long. I don't know. For the longest time, I was like, I need to see my character. It needs to be third person. I'm still that way, but I'm a little bit better with first person shooters and first person games now. But for a while there, I don't know what it was. Like I said, I was getting nauseous. I'd get really hot and motion sickness. A lot of it has to do with if you play a game like that has the blurring effect on when you move and it's blurry. If you can shut that off, for me anyways, I have to shut that off. If it's got the motionist where it's blurry, that makes me sick to my stomach. So yeah, these games aren't for everybody. Doom 3, another one that gave me severe motion sickness for a while. Again, I'm over it. Duke Nukem Forever came out. That one, I was one of the originals that bought the PC Gamer magazine back in around 97, 98, where it showed Duke Nukem Forever on the front page of the magazine. I had followed that closely throughout all of its years until it finally came out. I really enjoyed Duke Nukem Forever. I know it gets a bad rap, but if you can appreciate it for what it is, just being able to see everything in the game. We weren't supposed to get that game, and for it to come out even in the state that it's in, it's still pretty impressive to see that. And then now, later on today, we're getting kind of like a hybrid of games where it's a first-person shooter mixed with elements of Half-Life and RPG elements as well. Like you can play Fallout, obviously first-person perspective. Again, yeah, we got Far Cry, Area 51 on the original Xbox, Metro, The Outer Worlds. So those are all prime examples of games that could be classified as first-person shooters, but they've obviously got some RPG elements as well. There's obviously a revision of Doom that has come out the last couple of years on the newer consoles. Now, I've never played it. Me personally, looking at it, correct me if I'm wrong, it just looks like it's really, trigger happy. It looks kind of like really fast paced. It's kind of lost the charm of the darkness of the original Doom games, the first 3 games. And the newer Doom games, they look more like a Halo game as far as I'm concerned. So that doesn't really appeal to me. The new Wolfenstein games look pretty good. I have not played them yet. I saw there was a re-release for Shadow Warrior as well. So that's pretty interesting. Never played that one either. So yeah, obviously you can blame the first-person shooters of the 90s for the emergence of the online multiplayer games. Multiplayer, as far as I'm concerned, multiplayer would not be around today if it wasn't for the first-person shooters of the late 90s, because that really did kick it off. Obviously, cross-play is a big thing. I think that's really good that we can finally play our friends that may have, competing consoles, if you will, and we don't all have to have a PS4 or an Xbox One. We can do cross-play. Also, Call of Duty, obviously, we can't talk about this video without talking about Call of Duty and the importance that has had on the FPS genre as well. I've never played a Call of Duty game. I keep hearing Modern Warfare 1 and 2 are the best Call of Duties as far as the single-player campaign is concerned. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments below about that. So like I said, we talked about PCs in the 90s. That was, again, a really tough time for a lot of us because you had to have a real good computer to play a lot of these games that were coming out. Quake is another example. So I'm going to leave this video with a few comments from a few of my subscribers here. I'll start with Simon Kundal. Correct me if I pronounced that wrong. He mentions some of his fondest memories here. Quake 3 Beta, the space jumping map in Rainbow Six from 1998, Half-Life 2, Counter-Strike 1.6, and he recalls playing Duke Nukem 3D as well. I think we all do. His best single-player FPS experience, again, he says right here, is the first Call of Duty Modern Warfare games. He says here especially the second one and its soundtrack. So, again, is there something special about this soundtrack? Does it feature legitimate music from famous artists, or is it just a really good ambient soundtrack? Let me know. I'd really like to know. Does that game take place in the modern times, or does that take place in like the 60s or the 70s? Let me know. Mike Cart, he says here, GoldenEye was the most fun he had in high school. Him and his friends would have GoldenEye parties. They're playing versus into the early hours of the morning, guarding the vest. Yeah, GoldenEye. Believe it or not, my father, when he worked at Zellers, or might have been Kmart at the time, he went to a golf, I guess it was like a golf tournament, and he came back with one of the prizes he won, and it was a CIB complete in box GoldenEye 007 for the N64. Again, I didn't have an N64, and that game sat in my closet complete in box for years. And who knows where it went. It's gone now. Imagine if I still had that, eh? Bulls EG talks about how he had memories playing Duke Nukem 3D, Duke 3D, LAN parties, smoking weed, playing for hours. Him and his friends in the neighborhood would make maps of the neighborhood that they lived in. Yeah, that's just it. You used to be able to make your own maps with those games. And again, a lot of the companies were using the build engine from Duke Nukem 3D, and then that was the most popular engine until Quake came out, and then everybody was sort of using the Quake engine. Can't remember the name of it there, but that was everybody shifted over to the Quake engine, and the rest was history. We have here Simon Kundell again. He says, great experience, internet cafe, local LANs. Online playing doesn't compare to physically being in the same room, playing the same game. I have to agree with that. He says playing a first-person shooter with the mouse trumps using a controller. Yeah, that's a really good thing to mention as well. Anyone who's played a first-person shooter with the keyboard and mouse, it's a lot easier to navigate, obviously, your crosshair with the mouse than it is with the controller. So it is interesting that a lot of people are able to adapt to the controller playing these games on their PS4 and the original Xbox, or excuse me, the Xbox One. But the mouse and the keyboard, for a lot of people to this day, that's the only way you can play an FPS. And yeah, he mentions obviously being in the same room with your buddies. I can't stress it enough. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of couch co-op these days. Everybody lives in their own little bubble. Nobody hangs out with each other anymore, whatever the reasons may be. It's a lot harder to get together with people, but if you have the opportunity, if you can have a friend over and you can play couch co-op, any game for that matter, couch co-op is extremely fun. I really miss those days, and it'd be really cool to see a resurgence in couch co-op, so I doubt that's going to happen, wishful thinking. So that's going to do it. Those are some of my memories playing a lot of these games here, growing up with first-person shooters. I'd like to know your memories as well. Please leave them in the comments below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care.